So hello and welcome to another Valorant meta talk here, and today we're going to be talking about Chamber and exactly where Chamber will see play. What maps will Chamber become meta on? Because of course we just had the Valorant Champions tournament and Chamber wasn't a part of that tournament, so we won't be able to see Chamber until the next batch of tournaments come about, and so we have to wait to see exactly where the pros will be using Chamber, what maps Chamber will be most useful on. But I thought we would take a look at Chamber and kind of think about, okay, what maps do we think the Chamber could be meta on? And we're going to do this by obviously looking at Chamber's abilities and what he brings to the table, his own toolkit, and then also looking at, okay, the meta on each map. Is there a space for Chamber, or is it just already determined that on a certain map you just play these 5 agents and that's all you can really do? Or is there actually room for Chamber to make his way in there onto certain maps, which might give you an indication, if you do like playing Chamber, what maps perhaps would be best for Chamber and will suit him the best. So let's start off with Chamber's abilities, and we'll just go left to right here. We have the trademark to start off with. The trademark, obviously a little alarm bot in a way, and essentially this ability, I would say, doesn't really matter for the map that much. It will be slightly more useful on some maps than others, but generally speaking, there will all if you're defending a site, there'll always be a choke point to that site that you can put one of these on, or there'll always be somewhere where you can put this on pretty much every map. I can't think of a single map where there isn't a good spot to at least put one of these down. And obviously if you're on attack, always just covering flanks, again, there's always going to be a decent spot. There might be some like slightly better where you can hide it better, but generally speaking, I think that this isn't going to be a sort of big indication of what maps Chambers will be good on, because it's pretty ubiquitous in terms of putting those trademarks down. They'll always be useful. Next up we have the Headhunter, and again, I mean, there is literally no map where this is an advantage over the others. I think it's just a sheriff, a slightly better sheriff that it's a gun. Like, it's going to be good on all maps. It just is what it is, and again, I don't think this will really have any bearing on the maps that Chamber is good on. But next we come to the Rendezvous, and this one though is very important, and it's very important for a couple of reasons. One, obviously it is E ability, it's his free ability, it's the ability that you get to use no matter what, and it's very important to Chamber if there is good locations to be teleporting around, if there is a good use of this that allows you to maybe rotate quicker or easily get to 2 common positions that are both very good, whether it be defensively or offensively, and just teleporting from one to the others to let you peek out certain ways. This will definitely matter for what maps Chamber is good on what maps he isn't good on, because it is his free ability. It's the main ability that you will be using every round, and so there has to be some good way for you to use it. And then finally we have the Tour de Force, and again, this one, I think his ultimate, again, like every other character in the game, if you have a really strong ultimate on a map, then you're probably going to be pretty good on that map. That really does matter for these characters, and Chamber is no different. Obviously, basically an operator for free. This will obviously determine, is an operator good on that map, because some maps it's better than on others, and so that will be a big part of discussing what maps Chamber will be good on. So now let's go through each map and take a look at the agent comps that were most commonly run at Champions, and talk about, well, is there a space for Chamber? Could Chamber take that place? And we're going to just go from the top down. So we'll start with Breeze here and take a look at that, and then sort of go into the map and talk about, well, does Chamber make any sense here? So on Breeze, we have 3 agent locks: Jet, Sova, and Viper. These are absolute certs, dead certainty. Every single team ran them when they played this map, and I really can't see that changing at all. These 3 will stick around, so that means that there's only 2 spaces left for Chamber to potentially take. And the next up is Sky. Well, actually Cypher is next up, but we'll get to that. Basically Sky or KO kind of add up to 96%. Most teams ran one or the other. It was basically just a call of which initiator you prefer in terms of Sky or KO, and I think Chamber's toolkit obviously isn't that similar to them, and so Chamber isn't going to take one of those positions, so that's a 4th spot pretty much deadlocked in. And then the final spot was normally taken by a Killjoy or a Cypher. As you can see, Cypher did win out most of the time, and this is obviously because he is a Sentinel. You would expect that Chamber is mostly going to be taking the role of one of these 2 agents the most, because those are probably the ones that he's most similar to. I think that these 2 agents, or as second duelist, is kind of where Chamber is going to fit in the most and take those roles. So then let's take a look at the map Breeze, and will Chamber be good on this map, and will he be meta on this map, and will he basically replace Cypher or Killjoy? And I think the answer is yes. And I'm sure that most of you probably expected this for Breeze. I think Chamber will absolutely be meta for a couple reasons. One, obviously, the sniper rifle on Breeze is going to be absolutely insane, because Breeze is obviously a very, very big map, and you know, there'll be plenty of opportunity for Chamber to, you know, get a lot of different kills on this map using his ultimate, and so I think absolutely that will be something that Chamber will make use of. But also there is quite a few good teleport locations, whether it be you want to use it for faster rotations, you know, because Breeze is obviously a very big map. So if you want to use it for a faster rotation and get out of there as quick as you can and get across the map as quick as you can, or if you just want to, you know, play aggressive kind of angles, if you want to play some cheeky angles, you know, maybe you could put one like this, you know, something like this. You're playing in this close right corner and then you teleport on top of this tower, you know, or something like that. Or you start on the tower and, you know, you come elsewhere, maybe behind the wall, something like that. You know, I think will be very common, and because there is some good vertical elements to this map, particularly on B site, I could definitely see Chamber utilizing that in a strong way, and you know, being a very strong pick. And also, of course, the trademark, you know, the one that most teams put a Cypher trip there in Tunnel. I would expect that a trademark might go there instead, and they also might, you know, put one maybe on A short or something like that, or maybe on B main, you know, things like this. I would expect 100% to become pretty regular, and I think this one is probably the most obvious one that Chamber will, I'm fairly certain, be a good pick on Breeze. Next up, we have Haven, and this one is a very interesting one because, as you can see, again, we have Jet as a pretty much universal pick. Astra is a universal pick. We have Killjoy at 88%. Then we have Sova at 71%, and we have Sky at 58%, Breach at 50%, Cypher at 13%, Reina at 17%, and a couple 4s for KO and Raze. So I would say here, again, we have 3 pretty much locks with Jet, Astra, and 1 of Sky or Breach. You know, normally it was one or the other, but I think there was 1 or 2 instances where both were maybe used. But, you know, again, pretty certain that you're going to have at least one of those 3 agents. And then most teams were running Sova as well, and I do think Sova is pretty good on that map and will become, again, pretty likely. And I don't think that Chamber, you know, will replace Sova in any sort of way. And so then you basically come down to, you know, most teams running Killjoy. Can Chamber replace Killjoy on the map Haven? So when we talk about Haven and Killjoy on Haven in particular, Killjoy was picked for a lot of different reasons, and she is pretty strong on this map. One was this turret that a lot of different teams used, or something to this effect, because this turret can see both this and this, which is, of course, incredibly strong in terms of information, and teams kind of adapted to this pretty well. But I would actually suggest, if you are playing on Haven, to use this turret, because, you know, in your ranked games, you know, unless you're at a very high level, people aren't going to really notice this turret. But, you know, pro teams did pretty quickly, and they started, you know, just spamming this wall to try and kill this turret as quickly as they could. But in your ranked games, that probably isn't going to happen, so don't worry about it too much. But Killjoy also pretty much allowed most teams, and a lot of teams did something similar to this, although the setup can change wildly, because Killjoy has good setups pretty much on all 3 sites. But a lot of teams used this kind of setup here with an alarm bot and 2 nanoswarms on B, and basically just saying, you know, we won't defend B, you know, we'll put like 2 towards A. You know, we won't worry about too much on B. We'll play retake B. We have, you know, the information and the slowdown here of the nanoswarms to stop anyone, you know, quickly pushing B. And combined with this turret, you know, it was all very, very strong. And of course, the Killjoy lockdown has quite a few different uses here as well. Killjoy can come in, you know, put a lockdown. You know, obviously we've seen something like this be very popular. You know, there's I mean, if you can get into Garage and get Garage control, you know, something like this is just, I mean, you know, pretty insane for a lot of things. Obviously, once you've got a site, you know, you can, we saw this kind of lockdown a lot on C site. There's just a lot of good, pretty decent lockdowns to use. And for retake as well, you know, something like this in Garage. I remember there was a game where, you know, they were putting it something like here. And, you know, people had to retreat all the way back to site, off site. Like, you know, there's just a lot of good, you know, this one obviously is pretty common as well on a site where the attackers are forced pretty much into this corner here. So there's just a lot of good Killjoy ultimates on this map. And so that begs the question for Chamber, can he see play? Well, the double alarm bot will be pretty useful as well. You know, you could probably put one on B. You can maybe put one on whatever, site you're playing, or maybe just into Garage as well, which can be useful. And Haven does have, some nice teleport locations. Of course, the boxes on A might be a common choice here. You might go for something like this, or maybe this. Just to quickly peek down here and then teleport up here, and now I'm watching short. Just plenty. There is quite a few decent locations to put your rendezvous there, and there are some decent op locations as well, of course, with the ultimate, whether it's down C long, whether it's down through a main as well. There's going to be, quite a few decent areas for Chamber to use his tour de force, so I do expect him to be a potential pick, but I do think that Killjoy and Killjoy's just usefulness in a lot of different ways on this map will probably outshine Chamber overall, and so I don't expect him to become the main pick, but I definitely could see some teams experimenting with him on this map. Okay, next up we have Icebox, and Icebox is probably the map where the meta is the most stale, where things are most solved, because we have 4 agents that are pretty much auto-include, and they are Jet, Sova, Viper, and Sage, and without big changes to some of these agents, this is probably going to stay exactly the same. The next most picked agent by quite a bit was Reyna, and then we had a couple instances of Killjoy as well, a KO, and a Raze. But of all the maps, this is one that I definitely see Chamber winning out on and going on top of Reyna. Chamber will just be a lot more useful for teams overall, I think, and fulfills a pretty similar role. Reyna is used on this map normally defending a site. That's what Reyna is used for most of all, because you can get into a lot of weird angles, you can get into a lot of weird spaces, and the idea is this Reyna can be like here in this sort of 1 kill corner, get this kill that no one is really expecting, as your opponents are running in here. You get killed by this Reyna, she dismisses out, she manages to get back here, she's safe again, she's ready to do it again. That's what Reyna is mainly used for on this map. But of course, Chamber can fulfill much of the same role with his teleport tricks. He can play those same weird angles, he can come and play here as well, put one of his teleports, maybe even back here where it's safe, and then put one back of sight, back of screens, maybe even on top of screens, right? And just go to a weird place and just quickly get a kill, get out, and away we go. And so he fulfills much of the same role as Reyna, but of course he comes with the added benefit of having extra utility as well to use in his trademarks. And it's common for people on in ranked games at least to Sage wall, and we know that Sage is one of obviously the main picks. You'll often see, this Sage wall down tube here, just to stop any quick running down tube. But pro teams, they lean away from this quite a bit. And they tend to try and use the Sage wall for a retake. And we've seen a lot of it, particularly in I think it was the Fnatic game against Cloud9, where the Sage wall was basically the MVP of the game, because both teams just kept using a Sage wall to defuse the spike. And so very successfully. And so pro teams will normally wait for that. And so instead of putting a wall there, what I expect is that, Chamber will just put one of his little bots there, and maybe he can come and put, one on A site or B site or wherever he's playing. And of course, there are good op locations as well, good sniper locations, whether it's through the back of A site, looking down here on A, or whether it's down this long corridor on B. Of course, there are a lot of long range fights on Icebox, and so this is probably the most certain I would be that Chamber is going to take Reyna's place as that 5th agent on Icebox, and just fits the role really, really well. Okay, next we have Split, and Split is a bit of an odd one. Because we have, a bit more all over the place. In those other maps we had like complete certainties, but on this map, there is no 100% agent, and so it's a bit more up for debate. And so maybe that will give Chamber, a space on some teams, but probably not all teams, just based off the fact that, there doesn't seem to be a definitive comp. And of course, on Split, Ascent played Omen, and pretty much no one else played Omen anywhere else. And it worked pretty well for them. So, there's a lot to be figured out on Split, I still think. We have Jet at 55%. Now, there's been, of course, a lot of talk about why Jet actually isn't good on this map, etc., etc. And we get Raze at 68%. This is the only map, I think, yes, where a different duelist outshines Jet. And so, maybe that gives you a clue that this is a pretty good Raze map. And then we have a bunch of agents here in the 50s. Now, again, for Chamber, it's probably going to be, and we did see some double duelist comps. Ascend did it, Crew did it to good success using both the Jet and the Raze. And, I don't think that Chamber will be replacing those agents because they are quite different. It's not like Arena where there is that possibility. Chamber is obviously quite different to those two agents. And so again, we're looking at, okay, well, can Chamber replace maybe a Killjoy or a Cypher? Now, not so much Sage, because we do see Sage, again, in a sense comp, they ran both Cypher and Sage, and so I don't think he'd be replacing Sage. It will be probably one of Cypher or Killjoy, who have a 45 and a 23% pick rate. So when it comes to Chamber and his abilities on the map Split, I mean, his trademark will have some use. Again, normally you'll get like an alarm bot or a trapwire here towards vents, and you can put a trademark there, and that will be absolutely fine. But to me, that's kind of where his full usefulness is already starting to run out. Again, these trademarks will find, just some generic value anywhere, pretty much on any map. So that's no big deal, as will his Headhunter, of course. But the Rendezvous, there isn't too many, like, amazing things that you can do with the Rendezvous on this map, I don't think, unless I'm mistaken. But I don't think there's anything, like, super crazy that I'm like, wow, that would be absolutely insane to do. You can go for like the aggressive peak kind of strategies here, but there isn't like, much verticality that you can use. I mean, maybe you can use this box in this left hand corner, or maybe you can get yourself back up to heaven. I don't know. It's nothing like crazy with his Rendezvous. And again, there isn't too many great sniper angles, and this is probably going to be a bit of a common theme, right? If you don't see much pick rate of Jet on a map, then you're probably not going to see too much Chamber either, because it probably means there isn't too many good sniping angles. I mean, of course, like B main is pretty decent, and of course there's mid that you can do it as well, but it's nothing like crazy. It's nothing that I would say is amazing. And so I don't really think that Chamber will probably be a meta pick. Again, I could see some teams exploring Chamber on this map, and he's not a bad pick by any means. But I don't think that he will become like the most picked agent, and I think most picks of Chamber on this map will probably be because, a team just feels comfortable with the agent. Next up, we have Ascent, and Ascent we can see again, high pick for Jet, which is probably pretty good for Chamber. Sova and Astra, 100% locked. Then we have Killjoy at 70%, and then we have a bit of a mix for what's next. Obviously, Killjoy and Cypher do add up to the 100%, so every team was running at least one of them. And then we have, some discussion about, do we want to run Sky? Do we want to run KO? Do we want to run Sage? There's a bit of a debate there, even Reina as well. So it seems like most teams have, a solid lock of 4 with those 3 and one of those 2, and then like a flex pick. I don't think that Chamber will be taking this flex pick. I think that's probably, more up to the teams, and I don't think he will take that. Again, I think it's going to come down to him replacing either Cypher or Killjoy. And considering Killjoy is the sort of most popular of these picks, let's talk about what Killjoy can do on this map. Of course, again, we have plenty of good setups for the turret. There's plenty of good Killjoy setups on this map as well. Common one that you will probably see is like, the full lane execute from a Killjoy here, with like an alarm bot here, and the double nanoswarms just completely stop any rush there. But of course, there are some very good ultimates here as well. This one on B site is obviously very common that you see, and this one on A site as well is pretty common for a lot of teams as well. And because the ult orb here on the A side, at the very least, is pretty free for attackers, the ult orb here is probably one of the most free in the game for one side, and that is, for the attackers, all they have to do really is clear this. And as soon as they have control of that little bit, which isn't hard if you, send multiple people there, then Killjoy can get this orb for pretty much free. That means that, you can really abuse this lockdown if you want to on attack. But there's also good lockdowns on defense as well. This one for retake is a very common one. As you can see, it gets everyone out of sight and forces them back into wine here in this bottom corner. And so again, Killjoy just has a lot of usefulness with her ult. But that is not to say that Chamber won't see any play on this map. In fact, what I would expect is that those teams running Cypher might change to a Chamber instead, as I do think he's probably going to be a bit better than Cypher on this map overall, because there are very good op locations. Obviously mid, looking down here into mid, and having a sniper rifle there is pretty good. We've seen it on A as well sometimes. Sometimes people will snipe down here. I'm not sure that this one is great, because they could be on the box, they could be down here. So I've never been a massive fan of that. But in mid, both sides of mid really, opping will be normally very effective, and normally do you a lot of good. And so I think Chamber, for that reason, probably will take some of Cypher's pick rate, but I would expect Killjoy to still be the number 1. Next up, we come to Bind, and as we can see again, it's a bit more all over the place. We do have a very high pick rate for Viper and Sky and Astra as well, and a lot of teams were picking Sova. We have some Raze, we have some Jet, we have some Sage, we have some Brimstone even, some KO, some Reyna. You know, it is a bit more all over the place, a tiny bit of Killjoy, no Cypher. What will interest me on this map is, of course, no Killjoy or Cypher was common. Only 6% and 0% there. So that seems that most teams have agreed, and also this low Jet percentage as well. Bind in general won't be Chamber's best map. Now the reason for this, and the reason that you saw very low Killjoy and Cypher pick rates on this map, is basically because there really is only 4 ways to go. You know, there is only 4 main ways for attackers to go on this map, instead of the usual 5 that most other maps have. And the problem with this is, and the reason that, you know, you don't really see a lot of that, is these choke points are normally very small. Look at how small these choke points are here. And obviously this one is dropping down a window and a ledge as well, so that's pretty dangerous. But they're all very small. And that means that generally speaking, you know, this map is pretty easy to defend on. And it's why I think you often will get the double controller, because you kind of need to be able to re-hit a site. Because normally your first push is going to be stopped, generally speaking. Because it doesn't take that much utility to stop you. You know, one raid nade in here, raise nade. That's what I was trying to do. You know, one in here, and you know you have to fall back straight away. You know, a Viper, Orb, and Molly in any of these locations, again, you're falling back straight away. It's very easy for the defenders to stop an initial attack on Bind, and so that is why, you know, most teams go with the double controller. And you know, generally speaking, you just don't need that Sentinel lockdown presence, because it's actually quite easy to stop an initial push even without a Sentinel on these maps. That being said, Chamber does have one distinct advantage on this map, and it is this. When you place this rendezvous just in the corner there, you can actually then put your other one just in this corner here. It just about reaches the range for that, and that means that he can teleport across to the other side without needing to, you know, make the sound of the teleporters. And this is a very important point, because this is a very crucial skill that only Chamber has access to. And this is the only real reason that I think Chamber would see any play on this map. If a team, you know, can utilize this in a good way. I mean, there are some places, again, you can teleport onto, you know, maybe onto this box. But this will be the main use. If anyone does use Chamber on this map, this I think will be the main use, is that the quick rotations defensively will be very good. Because there isn't too many great sniper locations on this map. You kind of have down here as one option, and you can go Heaven maybe. Is a second option, but it's not the most prolific map for a sniper rifle, and so I don't expect Chamber to see much play, but if he does, I think it will, because he can rotate extremely quickly. And so then we come to Fracture, and Fracture, being a new map, is a bit all over the place again. We have a Breach lock, you know, Breach seems to be a certainty, but then, you know, there's mixed feelings about Jet, Raze, Astra, Viper, Sky, Killjoy, Sage. Cypher was pretty picked a lot as well, so we'll probably have to look at Cypher. Will Chamber be able to eat into this Cypher pick here? Does that make sense? Is he better than Cypher on this map? Because I think that is the role that he would probably fulfill. And I think for Chamber, the unfortunate answer is probably not. I think that Cypher's information gathering is just a bit too good on this map and the way this map works overall. Of course, this is a new map, so I could be wrong, because of course it's the least we've seen of any of these maps, and it's probably the most uncertain of any map. So I definitely could be wrong in this instance. But I do think that Cypher has some nice setups he can do on this map, and just has a bit more information gathering that is kind of crucial on this map, because of, you know, the 4 ways that attackers can go, you know, the 4 sides that they can kind of enter through. If you can have, you know, control or some form of control, like I've got set up here on 3 of them from one character, then that is obviously going to be a big help. So here, you know, I've just, you know, put a trap wire there, I've put my camera here, and I've put a trap wire there. That just gives us some control of 3 of the different 4 sides that the attackers could come from. And I think that that's going to be, that third side, that third way is just going to be very valuable compared to the 2 that Chamber can do. You know, Chamber can obviously put maybe 2 trademarks, you know, maybe one around here or maybe one up here. You know, he could put 2 and he could lock down maybe, you know, and indicate some hit towards A here. But unlike Cypher's camera, that, you know, if played well, could maybe stay there indefinitely. Of course, these trademarks once destroyed, a team could just fall back and then wait, and at pro levels, that's probably what will happen. And so I don't think that Chamber is offering just enough with just those two trademarks. But then importantly, there isn't anything too spectacular about the rendezvous. There isn't too many crazy locations to teleport to. I mean, there's some okay here on A site. You know, you can go maybe down here and then maybe, you know, have one on site as well. It's like, it's okay. It's not terrible, but there's nothing too special about it in my mind. And the snipers as well, you know, you can snipe down here. There is, you know, a pretty good snipe location here down on B. But other than that, there isn't too many great angles, maybe on A as well. But again, I don't think that this is like the craziest thing in the world, and I don't think it's the best place to be sniping on the map. And so I don't think that Chamber will be that utilized on this map. It's not like there's any quick rotations, because the whole point of the map is the defenders do get quick rotations anyway, because their spawn is in the middle of the map. So nothing too crazy about that as a whole, and I don't expect that Chamber will see too much play, but it is a new map, and the meta probably isn't solved for this map, so there's still plenty of, you know, things up in the air, and I could definitely see things changing quite a lot as, you know, people figure out the map more and more. And so that was just a quick understanding of Chamber and what Chamber is going to be doing on these different maps and how likely it is to see him on those maps. A quick sort of overview and conclusion then. So I'd expect Chamber 100% actually to be on Icebox and be meta on Icebox. I don't see how at least some teams don't run him on Icebox, and I would expect him to become sort of the normal fifth on that map with the other four that are already pretty much locks. Breeze as well, obviously, very big map, very good for snipers in general, and so I would expect Breeze, he becomes pretty regular occurrence on Breeze. The next I would probably guess would be Ascent. Again, there will be some good sniper locations for him, but it will definitely be less than the first two that I just mentioned. And you could probably lump Haven in with Ascent, where I think he'll be experimented with, he'll be tried, but maybe won't be, you know, super successful. And then, you know, again, we come to the other three maps where I don't expect him to see play too much. Again, someone could use that bind, you know, quick teleport across the sites, which could be pretty useful, but I don't expect, you know, too much play from Chamber here on those three maps. So if you are, you know, looking to play Chamber and wondering what maps you should play Chamber on, I'd probably say Icebox and Breeze are your best bets. Haven and Ascent are decent, and the other three maps, it's still okay. It's still not going to be terrible, because I think the agent is pretty decent overall, but it's not going to be anything too crazy, and it probably will feel a bit more clunky on those three maps.